everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Spartan Podcast. We've got a special guest here with us tonight, and we're going to take this on a kind of different angle than we've gone in other episodes. So we are going to be talking a lot about mental health and, how it has played a part in Chris's life and his Spartan journey. So welcome, Chris, to the Canadian Spartan Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We're happy to have you here. Why don't you just get started by introducing yourself and, how you kind of got introduced into Spartan racing?
Absolutely. Yeah, so my name is Chris Gilbert. I live in Sudbury, Ontario. I have been a paramedic for the last 10 years now, and Spartan ambassador, obviously, working alongside you two, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. I got into Spartan October of 2022. I did Blue Mountain for my first ever race, and it was just on a whim, something that I wanted to give it a shot, and we had an absolute blast. And it was we took on the super and the sprint, and we were hooked one weekend in, and everything was going really, really well. And then in March of 2023, I ended up going off on stress leave, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And it was initially, we thought it was just going to be a couple of weeks. I was going to take a little bit of time away from work. And then the time off really kind of unraveled some of the things that I didn't realize I was going through. And so part of that was just trying to go back to my roots. I had to find out who I was. I had to find out what worked for me. And I think the biggest thing and how it kind of got me here with Spartan was my psychologist said, you're really into fitness. So if you have any outlet, especially with a community, lean into it. Because there's two really good outlets. You can talk to people and you get your physical stress, you just put it out on the hills. So that led into becoming an ambassador early 2023. And then, my Spartan career, as I'll call it, just took off. We raced all across Canada. We went to the States. I got my wife into it, and we've had an absolute blast. I think we did something, I want to say we totaled at about 11 or 12 races last year. Couple trifecta weekends. Yeah, it was good. The hurricane heat. And now we're here, an ambassador again for 2024. And we're looking at, if we can have it this year, we're looking at going for 3 or 4 trifecta weekends. We're doing the 12-hour hurricane heat, a bunch of the trails. And if we can somehow make it happen, we're going to see if we can get to Greece.
Amazing.
So love Spartan.
That is a quick journey for you. Like that escalated really fast. But I like what you said about combining the fitness, or your psychologist said, combine fitness with community, and also the other pieces being outside too, at all these different venues. It almost takes all of the mental health things that we talk about and combines them, and then put in a little pain, and here we are.
Well, exactly. And you know what I always say, so many people start a fitness journey for so many physical goals or physical reasons, but the reason they stay on it is so much more beyond that. And it is community and it's health in every aspect. And I find people get more out of fitness and Spartan racing than they ever could have imagined when they showed up on day one. And it really
100%.
takes you on a completely different journey than I think a lot of us maybe anticipated at that first race or that first day in the gym or whatever it may be. So I would love to hear, because are you currently still a paramedic, or have you've talked about shifting gears? I only know because we've talked, but give us a little more detail for the listeners.
So I am still currently a paramedic. We can go into the long nitty gritties of it. Technically, I'm not certified anymore. So once you're not working for a certain period of time, even though I still have my license, you become something called deactivated. Mm-hmm. So I still hold all the titles of the paramedic, but I'd have to go do a whole bunch of hoops to get back into it, which is still the plan. The plan is to still go back, because we talk about community and I love my Spartan family. And I'm still missing my EMS family. So I'm not quite ready to give it up. However, over the past year, the gears have shifted for me quite a bit. And I had to take a real hard look at what I was going to do going forward, because I've been a paramedic for 10 years. And, I say I've had the luxury of doing it all, but that's not always a good thing to say that you've done it all pre-hospital. And it just made me take a real hard kind of look into what I want to do for the next 30 to 40 years of my life. And that's where my plan is to go back I don't think it'll ever be in the same capacity as when I left, which is, it's sad, but at the same time, it's also very inviting into the new things. And I know, Amber, we've talked quite a bit. We've had these little sessions where we've talked about the gyms and fitness and everything. And I've realized that my time being away from a paramedic's role, I've still been able to really interact with a lot of people. I've been able to help a lot of people. So the core of who I am never went away. I'm just doing it in a different capacity right now. But I am still a paramedic. Technically, I'm still part of my tactical team up north, advanced care paramedic. But yeah, the world's our oyster, I guess, for where I'm going to go coming back. I think the tentative plan will be come back for the summer. And then we'll see. I don't know.
Well, and the nice thing is you're helping people, but like you're helping them pre-medical emergency, which is kind of nice. So you still get to help people a little bit earlier on, in a different capacity. So let's chat a little bit about that and what you're doing now, because you are helping people through their fitness journey. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, and actually, I tie it back to something you both had said when we started talking not that long ago. Is just like, you get your physical outlet out on the hills and you have the community. And why Spartan stuck with me so well. And I know, Jill, you're going to laugh at this. It was Tremblant in 2023.
Nice.
And I did an ultra attempt.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize how far you'll go inside when you're doing one of those endurance races.
Oh, boy.
And I had a lot. Yeah. I had a lot of really hard talks with myself, and I had a lot of really good talks with myself. And I realized that there's such a mental component that goes into Spartan racing. And then that's kind of where my hybrid style of training came out. And yeah, Amber, you're right. That's where I'm trying to help people now is, so I have my gym, TNT Fitness, and I gear most of my training towards paramedics and first responders. And initially it was just because I got it. I get the shift work, I get the demands of the job. So I know how to train my colleagues and other first responders up to the level that they should be at performing on the road. And from there, I noticed really quickly that I was able to help them a lot more with their mental side of things, because I also,
Absolutely.
I got it when they come to me and it was a bad day. Like, I get it. We've all had bad days, but I get it when other people don't get it. And I had a lot of athletes come. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, I was just about to interrupt you. You keep going.
Yeah, so I had a lot of athletes come, and whether it was just they were having difficulties talking with their spouses, with their family, with even their healthcare team about what they were going through. And it was fitness kind of opened the door to have that heart to heart, because you never know a bond until you're doing hard work with each other. And then all of a sudden, my clients were leaving here feeling lighter. They were feeling heard. And I think that's one of the biggest things that was missing, is that we don't see a lot of gyms that have this mental, like we always have groups, but we don't have that being heard side of it. And especially with, our small community of first responders, that was really big for their mental well-being. So that's where TNT is kind of growing into right now, is fostering a really athletic warrior tribe of people, and also really trying to push that mental health side of things, just to make sure that it's okay to not be okay, and bring it to the gym, because we're going to sort it out. And then
I love
the exit strategy.
I love that, because the thing is that that's not always talked about. I'm not in your role, obviously, but I would not expect a paramedic or someone in the nursing profession to be thinking about that. And I know post PTSD is something we're talking about now, but I never thought about that at all, because I'm not in that profession. I just assumed, well, that's what they wanted to do, and they're good at that because they can handle that. And I know I can't handle that, so I wouldn't go into that field. But the people going into that field are still you and other people who still can experience trauma and still have those feelings. So it's not like you're just a shell of a person that walks in and can handle stuff. You're still a human like everybody else. So, and that, I never heard people talking about that until recently. So that's amazing that you can combine those two things.
Well, yeah. And you know what, so for those listeners who maybe don't know who I am, I do own a gym as well. And I am not a first responder. However, I do have a large member base of first responders. And I will be honest, one of the main things that they say is one of their best takeaways is the fact that when they're in the gym, they don't have to respond. They don't have to think. They don't have to react. They're just there. It's an outlet. There's somebody there encouraging them what to do, telling them what to do next. They don't have to be in that responsive mode, because I mean, what you guys
decision.
do is high stress. Like you're thinking on your toes all the time. So when you come to a space and just be surrounded by people who just, you know, are challenging their limits, which is the self is just such a stress relief, but also like cheering each other on, lifting each other, and you know, really just wanting to see each other become a better version of themselves. It is just such a blessing to that community in particular. From as far as
Absolutely.
yeah.
And, you know, just Jill, to your point, like I've been a paramedic for a decade. And even when I came into it, PTSD, no one talked about it.
No.
It was so rare back then. And you know what? I'm glad it's coming to light in a way now, because I think we need even far more resources than we have. But yeah, it was never something we talked about, because you're spot on with it. I showed up, and for the last 10 years, I've never had a problem with any call that I've ever gone to. I've never worried, right? I've gone to nightmares of calls, and it's never been something I worried about walking away with, let alone thinking even with my partners, right? Like, I'm good. And we always do the thing, I'm good. Are you good? Yeah. Okay. We just nod our heads and move on.
But you're not.
But at the end of the day, and actually this is kind of my little segue, is I had a police officer, he's a good buddy of mine. He comes to train with me quite a bit. And he came up to me, and he's had this very similar battles. And he said, you know what? I love my career. I am a cop at my heart. But he's like, I don't know if I can do that for my life. And I was taken aback. I'm like, wow, like that's huge that you're opening up about it. He said, what was that big thought? And he said, because at the end of the day, I'm a person too. And I was a person long before I became a paramedic or a police officer or whatever your first responder designation is. Like, I was a person long before then. And I'm going to be a person long after. And you can't do it forever. And some do great careers. But at the end of the day, you're going to leave it, and you're going to have to find out who you are. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that with PTSD where it comes from is that you lose yourself along the way. What makes you feel good, your stress outlets, and knowing your own boundaries and limits with it. And then again, I tie that back to Spartan, because you're going to find out who you are on those hills, and same in the gyms. And yeah, I think surrounding yourself with those people who like-minded, right? They're all doing the same thing, and no one's judging you. Everyone's there to support you. And I've seen it on the hills in Canada and in the US. If you're having a down moment, a total stranger is going to come up, and they're going to pick you up, even if just
countless times I've had that happen to me. Even there's even certain people that for some reason they always pop into my race, and I see them and I'm like, oh, thank goodness it's you again. But that just lifts you up and helps you so much. So that's really interesting about the Tremblant experience. So let's go back to that a little bit, because you have a little bit of a journey with that one, probably a little bit of a vendetta with that one. And I love your story for this. And I'm excited for you for this year, because you went to Tremblant, and maybe you can talk about your Tremblant experience. And we're talking the Ultra here. And for those of you who are watching who didn't hear our Ultra podcast, Tremblant is quite difficult. I believe it was either 40 or 60% failure rate. It was a big failure rate of people. It was cold. It was wet. It's the first 2 kilometers is up an entire hill. So, let's talk about that experience. For you.
Yeah, it's a tender subject for me, because I saw it, and this is, remember, at the beginning of my mental health journey. So I had just recently come off, and now in hindsight, I was looking for a challenge that I could overcome. And there's not many bigger challenges than the Ultra, and especially at Tremblant. So I'm like, I got this. And I made the decision a month out. And I'm like, 4 weeks is all I'm going to need. I'm going to do this 50K. Yeah, it's 50K. I've got it. And I was just looking for a challenge that I could overcome. And so anyways, got to Tremblant. Everything was good. We were fighting that. Is it going to smoke us out? Are we going to have the air quality to do it? And so I woke up 4 a.m. and I had food poisoning, and I left, and I showed up at the hill, and it was, nerves. I had already been getting sick. I'm throwing up, and I'm like, okay, we're here to do this. And I remember that first descent, and I went way too hard right off the hop. I got halfway up the hill, and I lost my water bottle. And I relate this, I'll come back to it, but I relate that to mental health, because I had a plan and I thought I knew it all. And then I lost one pivotal piece of gear, and that rocked my entire race. I got to the top of the hill. realized I didn't have it anymore. Now I'm limping it station to station to station just to try and get my water in. And I was good until that ultra loop. And I was loving it on the way down. And I'm like, this is the best thing in the world. And then the cramps started. And then I couldn't keep them off because I didn't have any water that I could get back into me. I didn't have any salts. I started throwing up, and it was that death march back up that north side of the hill, coming back to the top of the ultra loop. And that's where I went to my dark places, because that's where I really it was 1 foot forward, just keep pushing, keep pushing. And I finally got to a point where I thought I was okay. And then I was coming back down the end of that, and we were coming up to transition. And Amber, I actually saw Zach, and because he had hurt himself. And
poor Zach.
Yeah, he had hurt himself pretty bad. And I remember being like, I don't even see you leaving the gate. How am I and you at the same part here? You were way ahead of me. And so we buddied up for a little bit, and then we started to go at the same pace. And he wasn't making any more headway on me, and I didn't have any injuries. And I got to transition. I sat down, which cardinal rule number 1, I shouldn't have done. And that was the end of my ultra attempt, because I ultimately, I didn't make it out of transition, and I was really defeated because, again, this was my challenge. I was supposed to make up for everything that I had just gone through, and I'm going to get through this. And now it's really nice to see that happened, because coming into it this year, I've learned so much.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I was really disappointed. And it's funny because we had talked about this afterwards, Jill.
Yes.
The next day, or 2 or 3 days later, when I got back, we did the Goggins challenge, because, 50 wasn't enough. So then I'm like, we're going to do 80K because I can do this. And yeah, so that was my ultra. And it was a monumental failure that ended up being one of the best things that could have possibly happened, because now this year I have got a million plans, and everything can go wrong, and I've still got my base now of what I'm working towards, and I know what that failure feels like. I know what the challenge of getting over that hill feels like. And before, I think the biggest thing was that I wasn't looking at it as a journey. I was looking at it as a destination. I'm going to get to the finish line. And that was the only thing on my mind. And it wasn't about enjoying any part of the training, any part of that race itself. I mean, thankfully, I stayed the next day and raced other races at Tremblant. I didn't even look at the hill. I was just head down, get through it. And that really kind of realized for me that that's how I was going through life, especially as a first responder. I go to work, I have my head down, I do what I have to do. I come home, I have my head down, I get through my time so I can go back to work. And I really relate that to Tremblant's ultra, because you can't do that. And even if you get to the finish line, what was the point? Right?
It's so true. If you're going to climb that hill, you better take a look at the top of it, because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Even through the fog, it's beautiful up there. And that's the thing with the ultra, and even the beast, I know Amber did that one. It was crazy too. It's so different when you start to put your body through that. If you've got any little tiny thing that may like just rot in the back of your mind, like a water bottle. I have stuff like that too, like a shoe's not tied properly. It can start to psychologically play with your brain. So like, I know one of the biggest pieces of advice for ultras that I had heard going in was, if you have run an ultra before, you are more than likely going to be able to run the second one, especially if you had failed it the first time, because it's like you learn an entire education on yourself by failing that. So
absolutely. And I hadn't even done a beast before. The only race I had ever done was the 10K. So I showed up there, it was ego. It was a huge ego that said I can do this because I thought I was hard and strong, and I realized not so much. But you know what? Again, I wouldn't change any of that for the world, because you're right. Spartan, that ultra, the water bottle, I remember going up the hills, and then you'd lose sight of everything because it was so foggy and so rainy. And then as you're running down, you could actually see the fog go up over your head. And that was just such an experience of a race. And this year, I can tell you, with certainty, I will cross that line.
Yeah, I truly believe that for you too, just because you have a different way of talking about it. We've talked about this before. Your plans have changed. You're going in with a whole new brain. Everything can turn on a dime now. So I cannot wait for that to happen for you. And the other great thing about that experience was the next day you got up and you ran another race. Sometimes you fail and you're like, this isn't for me. I'm not good at this. I can't do this. Everything's awful. No, you were like, that happened, getting up, I'm going to go race again. So that's pretty cool too.
Okay. So let's dig into this a little bit more. So less about like general ultra things. Let's dive into this because there was some serious mental barriers that one, you were required to overcome. Two, you did. And then let's talk about how you did it. So number one of the toughest things that we can learn to work through, and a lot of Spartan guys is equally a mental challenge as it is physically. Like when we say like their whole motto is like do hard shit. And it's not just like physically hard, guys. We're talking like you lose yourself and find yourself at the same time in these races. Like you're mentally pushing yourself sometimes further than you are physically. So the first thing I want to kind of dig into that you said kind of happened was your race didn't go as planned. Mentally, that is a shock to the system. So you ultimately you have two choices in that moment. One, you can figure it out, or two, you can let it ruin your race. So I want you to talk specifically, Chris, about that, what it did for you at the Ultra, and how it shifted your perspective moving forward into other races.
Okay, yeah. So the mental side of it. You're right. You can either pick yourself up and you can keep going, or you can stop. And I love how Spartan says do hard shit. And my gym has always had the no weak shit motto. And it's never been about physically or mentally weak. It's about quitting. Because at the end of the day, let's be very real on a Spartan race. And we've all been there and we've seen someone sit down and they're contemplating if they're going to continue. You really do. It starts with two choices. You're either going to get up and push forward, or you're going to stop. You have to realize that's in your control. Totally. No one's going to make that choice for you. You have to decide, are you going to get up and push forward, or are you going to stop? The second one, though, is how are you going to talk to yourself? Because Jill and I have talked at length about this one. From my Ultra 2023, I was not kind to myself. When things started to go wrong, I let it snowball. And by the end of it, I was so buried that I gave up on myself in transition. No one told me I couldn't go back out. I wasn't near any timelines that I wouldn't have finished. I quit. Like at that point, I gave up on myself because I wasn't supporting myself. Versus now, even in my darkest times, I absolutely have a different mindset about how I will approach talking to myself. And I always, sorry, go ahead.
No, so before you tell us that, how did you get from A to B? What did you do?
I did a lot more hard stuff. Yes, I did a lot of hard stuff, and I purposely put myself in situations that weren't ideal. My buddies and I joke about, we'll go run in the rain. Go run in the rain, go run in the heat, go do things that aren't enjoyable because you're not going to talk to each other. You're not going to enjoy it. But at the same point, what is the difference between running in the rain and running in the nice or the sun, right? It's your circumstance. And it's out of your control. And I think that's the biggest thing with, from Spartan to mindset to PTSD, no matter what you're going through, it is so much of what we put pressure on is out of your control. And we let that take control of us versus you have one thing that's in your control and that's how you're going to respond to things. Yeah. And we just throw that away. And all of a sudden it's the circumstances had control over how I felt and what I did. And so I put myself through a lot of that, and it's hard to quantify what does that because, I did a lot of fitness training. A lot of it was having tough conversations with myself, with my spouse, with my friends, and just really getting to the raw side of, how I want my life to go. Yeah. And it wasn't a quick process by any means, but I think from there, that really gave me the tools to kind of push forward. And now that I learned, I'll step that back. It gave me the tools to start having that conversation. And then from there, I got to start putting practice.
Yeah, that I love that. I love this story. It's so great because the other thing is that it can go back to that too. So sometimes we think if we win the thing, if we get the podium, if we finish the race, everything's going to be great, but it's just always a process. It's you're always going to go back to that and kind of pull out of your toolbox of my horrible ultra experience that I can do these things. And you said something about the internal talk, self-talk, and I just before doing the Tremblant Ultra, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is.
I had talked to my coach who coaches me for running, and she talked to me about talking to myself in the third person. And so I trained for the last month in all of my long runs, talking to myself in the third person, like I was my own coach. And yes, that would sound really funny from the outside, calling myself Jill and Jill this, you're doing great, Jill. Good job, Jill. But it was kind of game changing for me. So little tidbit that I got from a coach. But yeah.
Well, and it's so true because I actually on the exit strategy, which I'm sure we'll get into, but we talked about this. We talked about this self-talk and how at the end of the day, there's 2 points to that, but you're only with yourself all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You can surround yourself with great people as much as you want, but you are always in your own head 24/7, 365. If you're not making that a nice place to be, or if you don't know
Yeah.
how you are with yourself, that's step one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really, that's step one. And then the other side of it is, yeah, it's not a destination. The whole purpose of life is to experience. So if you're just, and I was so guilty of that. And I think that's what caused the burnout and everything else was, I'm just going to do as much as I can to get this job done. I'm going to work as hard as I can to get to that next level. And I'm going to try and get to the podium and then to the next race and to the next race and to the next race. But I'm not experiencing any of it. And that's the whole purpose of life is to experience it. So I want to enjoy every bit of the training. I want to have all these conversations. I want to try new things because that's where you learn. And that's where, again, I fall back on ultra. It was such a good experience to take on, so
Mm-hmm.
poorly planned, but look at what came from it.
Yeah, and it's not that I wanted to bring it up to like throw it out there, but I know how big of an impact that did have on you and how big of an impact that may have on people listening, because there were a lot of people who did not finish that race, and lots of people made decisions. I know people who had injuries that made good choices. They had an injury and came down to the bottom of the hill, and they could have went with I'm just going to muscle through this, and then had a worse injury. So sometimes you have to make decisions that way as well too. You being potentially dehydrated from the night before being sick and then not having any water, that might have been a really good physical choice for you as well. So sometimes it happens. It is what it is. So, but
Yeah, you
moving
never know what's going to
forward,
teach you.
we know you're crushing that race this year. We know you're going to have your food, your pack, your water, your everything, and you're just going to have fun doing it.
Let's talk about limiting beliefs specifically. Fear of failure. Overcoming obstacles, such as, when you fail an obstacle, that can really shift somebody mentally, specifically on the Spartan Hill. You approach an obstacle, the weather was terrible in Tremblant. That was really, really tough conditions to be racing in. So right there in itself, chances of a racer failing an obstacle, maybe they don't normally fail, was already a possibility. Okay? So speaking on the mental side of things, when you approach an obstacle, you fail it, how do you move forward? How do you shake that off? Like, what is your best suggestion for somebody dealing with that on the hill?
Well, if you're in a Spartan race, guess what? There's going to be more obstacles. So you can do it again. Yeah, no, I agree with you. You can definitely hit a wall if you let it. Tremblant specifically. All those overhead obstacles were completely wet. And blessing in disguise is I would rather take the loop. Try it. If I get through it, awesome. If I don't, I'll take the loop and then I'll just move on to the next one and keep trying. Yeah, it just comes down to, why are you there? Are you there to nail every single obstacle? Is that going to make or break your race? Or are you there to just give it an attempt? And I think if you can be happy with an attempt, then you should be happy with just taking that next step forward, whether it's in the penalty loop or it's moving on to the next obstacle, because you're going to have more.
That's true. There's always another, and you're going to go through it again if you're doing the ultra, so you can always try it again the next time.
And then if you have the
you guys do a double.
You
you're going to do it again
try.
and again and
Exactly.
again.
And that day
Exactly.
specifically with wet obstacles, and unless you're like maybe one or two people, you're probably going to fail some things, and that's okay. That's part of the journey, like you said. So some of the penalty loops are better than others. So pick the ones you're going to fail.
True. So I think one more thing I want to kind of point out before we wrap this up is one thing we didn't really talk about is, you know, whether you finish the race, you pull out, you hit the goal you set for yourself, you don't hit the goal you set for us, whatever your outcome may be on the Spartan Hill, I think everybody on here can agree that when you do a Spartan race, you discover something about yourself and just how much more capable you are. And whether you finish, like, I think the biggest mental takeaway, in my opinion, from Spartan is you really discover your strengths and just how much more you're capable of. And then when you go and train and you come back and you try and conquer a little more or do a little better or whatever it may be. And that really transfers over into everyday life because you grow in your confidence. You are more confident in your capabilities. And therefore, mentally, you just have so much more belief in yourself. So I want you to touch on that. Tie this whole thing together for us, Chris, because really and truly, that's that we want it all now. Give it all.
All right.
Lay all the cards out there.
I would simplify all that down into you get more curious, because I think you get to practice your strengths and you really get to solidify what worked well this time. But the biggest thing is you get to find your weaknesses. And if you can stop looking at weaknesses as failure and as that opportunity to grow, then I have something else now that I can choose to put my energy towards fixing. Whether I can make a difference of it or not, I have something that's a focus. If I'm always focusing on my strengths, I'm never shoring up the things that I'm weak on. But when you boil all that down, you get more curious. Every time you show up, every time you turn the bend, you get to be curious about what can I do? How can I do it? And I think that's, again, why I love Spartan so much. And I'm hoping that that'll transfer into every other race that I do. But yeah, it comes down to the curiosity of the unknown into what you're capable of. And that really needs to be, if I could say one mindset that you can keep when you're on the hill, it would be just to stay curious and have fun with it. Mm-hmm. Because again, you don't know what's going to work well. I have failed the Olympus every single time until Tremblant.
Wow.
And then I nailed it on that ultra for my first time ever, despite the rain. And I was like, this is going to go horribly. I was just ready to do the penalty loop and I got through it and I'm like, yes, like that was phenomenal. And then it was elevation, which is something that doesn't ever bother me. That killed me. Mm-hmm. So it was just staying curious as to what changed that, you know, every time. And I've done a million of these races now, and every single time it's gone different. Mm-hmm. So I would just say stay curious with it and stay open. And at the end of the day, if you're not doing this professionally, you chose to be there. Take the pressure off it. Just show up, give it your all, have fun, because your attitude going into something and finishing, I would hate to see someone cross the finish line and they hated every second of it.
Yeah.
But if you were the last person out there and you were like seconds from the cutoff, but you had a blast and you crossed that finish line with a smile on your face, that I want to be there for that photo, because you took something from that race. And people are so afraid, and I bring this into being an ambassador. People are so afraid to show up and even try. Why? I implore you to lean into that curiosity and show up at a race and be curious as to what you're capable of. Even the things that you can't do. Oh, well, move on to the things that you can, and then take that to your next one and keep going and show up and try. Because that first responders going through mental health and being afraid of the battle and having to open up and whatever. If you don't, you're going to stay stagnant and nothing's going to change. And you're going to be your own pity party and nothing grows there. But if you're curious as to how do I have a conversation? How do I have more conversations? How do I show up at races? How do I do all these things? By staying curious and being open, you're so much more capable of doing great things.
And just to touch on, you know, like a lot of people, you know, they haven't started because they're scared for whatever outcome or pressure they put on themselves. Guys, if you're a listener on here and you have maybe not yet tried your first race or tried the next distance of race, and you're just saying, oh, you're not sure. Okay, first of all, you are no longer making that race about yourself. You're making that race about other people, because you are putting unnecessary pressure on yourself because you're allowing outside sources to do that. If you're truly racing for yourself, and because you're, like Chris said, because you're curious about what you're capable of or finding out more, then will already signed up for that next run the race. You're not making it about yourself right now, and I strongly encourage you to stop caring or putting that pressure on. Well, Johnny did this and I can't go until I'm at that level. That is a bunch of crap, you guys. So you've heard it here. You are going to learn so much more about yourself just by signing up, whether you finish or don't finish. Nobody really cares, because Chris is with us today. We could not be more proud to have him on here, proud to have him as a friend and a fellow ambassador. And the fact that he is just coming back stronger, guys, I want that for every single one of you listening. So
yeah, I love that.
Everyone show up, because you never know who you're going to meet. I didn't know either of you until I showed up with this, and your guys' stories are so inspiring to me, and to hear that you love to hear my story. You don't know who you're going to meet. So yeah, you're right. Don't make it about yourself. Show up and just give it a shot, because there's so many other people out there that have such a vast background doing the exact same thing. You never know until you try.
Exactly.
And everyone is friendly out there too. So you are definitely going to, I mean, there's always one person, but for the most part, you can go up to people and just, you might be by yourself, but you're never going to leave the race alone. Like you'll find someone. I know through the ultra, I had different periods of time where I hung out with different people. So, and had conversations. And then sometimes it was just the silent death march. And then, but you just go through that and it's really neat the way that you get to meet people who are like-minded and really friendly and open, and it's almost like you're friends instantly. So
exactly. Awesome. It's like you should sign up for a Spartan race for yourself, but you need to know that you're never going to be out there by yourself. Okay. That is just the reality of this community. So keep your goals personal, you guys. But don't be scared to cheer each other on. There will be somebody out there cheering for you 100%. And when you feel like giving up, just know you're mentally strong enough to do it, because you made the decision to be there, which means you want it bad enough. And if you want something bad enough, then just keep putting one foot in front of the other, because it really doesn't matter how long it takes. You just got to get there. That's it.
The time's going to go by either way, whether you sit there or you're slowly walking forward. But the only way you're making progress is one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. A slow pace is better than no pace. That's what I tell everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for being on here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Such an inspirational chat for me, just to hear a different perspective. And, you know, it's very true that there's just such a massive population of first responders in the Spartan race community. I don't think that's coincidence. I just think, you know, you guys are some of the toughest mentally out there. And I truly, truly thank you and all our first responders for their service to their communities and for what you guys do to keep your community safe and healthy. And I truly am just so inspired by the mental grit that you and all the first responders out there go through. So
yes, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you both.